Greetings from Jerusalem. How have Jewish seminaries adopted and integrated ecological concerns into Jewish rabbinical education? I want to talk about three ways that they've done that. One relates to theological education, the second relates to food, and the third relates to renewable energy. In regards to theological education, in this case, how rabbinic seminaries have integrated ecological concerns into their rabbinic programs, I want to talk about a few different seminaries. My organization, the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, produced a report on faith and ecology courses in North American seminaries. And in this report, we talk about courses that seminaries, Jewish and Christian, have offered on ecologically informed theological education. Here are a few highlights of rabbinic programs in the United States and in Israel that are educating on ecology. In Boston, Hebrew College offers a course that focuses on the Talmudic tractate of Ta'anit. In that tractate, the focus is on drought and famine in the land of Israel. And that course talks about what do the Jewish people do in the land when the rains don't come. Tractate Ta'anit is one of the tractates that most relates to ecological concerns. And the course itself addresses those in relation to contemporary ecological issues. For example, it talks about how in the Middle East, the Eastern Mediterranean region, including Turkey, has become much more dry because of climate change in the past 15 years. The worst drought in 900 years hit this region from 2006 to 2010. And so applying this rabbinic text of the Talmud to look at current ecological concerns has been one of the focuses of this course. The dean of that rabbinical program, Rabbi Dr. Arthur Green, has some deep things to say about ecological thinking in the Jewish tradition.
I believe the most important role religion is going to have by the middle of this century will be helping motivate people to change their behavior in radical ways so that this planet can survive as fit for habitation by higher species. I think we're in very big trouble. That story of Maaseh Bereshit, as we have it at the beginning of Genesis, is of course what sustained and nourished Western humanity for the last more than 2,000 years. And that story had certain values. Yes, the value of rest, the value of God loving everything God created. Tov, 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 tov. That's all God says in that first chapter of Bereshit. By the way, the first time God says lo tov is of course lo tov hayot ha'adam levado. But in Bereshit Aleph, it's all tov, tov, tov. And that means that everything is created out of God's love. Everything is created because God wanted it to be that way. And it has something to do with the place of human beings and our responsibility. Urdu doesn't mean rule at your whim over, but rather means take responsibility for.
A second rabbinical program that's integrated ecological concerns into their teaching curriculum is the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Philadelphia. They offered several courses, one on food justice, and a second on Rabbi as environmental activist. In the second course, the professor who offers that course, Rabbi Mordechai Leibling, includes experiential education as part of it. So it's not just in the classroom talking about the linkage between being a rabbi and having environmental concerns, but also going out and looking at these issues in the broader context of society. What are environmental organizations doing, and how can faith-based organizations be part of that? A third seminary that offers Jewish ecological education as part of the rabbinic training is the Schechter Institute here in Jerusalem. And I actually taught a course on Jewish ecology, a semester-long course. We had 10 units, and we talked about themes like Genesis and stewardship of creation, Noah's Ark. How does the principle of Bal Tashchit, do not destroy, relate to ecological concerns today? How does observing Shabbat and turning off or reducing one's technology use relate to Shabbat? And also relate to ecology, and how does the sabbatical year, resting once every 7 years, inform an ecological vision for humanity in balance? A fourth seminary that has offered courses on Judaism and ecology is Hebrew Union College in New York City, and they've offered a course on sustainable living, and this looks at the linkages between sustainability and Judaism from a range of texts. So those are 4 seminaries. A fifth is the Zeidler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles, part of American Jewish University, and they've also offered coursework on this topic.
Imagine the fear and despair as Noah and his family are told that the life on earth is going to be wiped out. There's going to be a flood, and because of the evil of all humanity, humanity will start anew, but there's going to be massive drowning. And so in that terrible time, he's to build this ark big enough to contain all living things so that every species has the chance of renewal and beginning, and humanity will be generated out of his family one more time. God tells him, Tzohar ta'aseh lateva, make an opening so that the daylight can show in the ark. That is to say, in the middle of our fears, there has to be a source of light. And in the middle of the darkness, there has to be hope. Even in that ark, even with the flood waters raging, there had to be a way that inhabitants of the ark could look up, see sunlight, and know that they would survive. And we need to know that too. However trying and difficult our times may be, there has to be a source of light. And let me propose to you that in our time, as in all times, that source of light can be Torah, that source of light can be community, that source of light can be prayer and learning and study and good deeds.
So these 5 rabbinical programs show that there is an emerging movement of rabbinical education that's responsive to the ecological crisis. This didn't happen 30 years ago, but in the past decade, these rabbinical programs have deemed it important to infuse rabbinic education with ecological concerns. I now want to talk about the linkage between rabbinical education and food ethics. It's one thing to talk about how Jewish ethics relate to climate change and biodiversity loss, but it's another thing to think about how do Jewish ethics and rabbinical training inform the way that we eat food and what types of foods we choose to eat. In this regard, Rabbi David Rosen and Rabbi Daniel Sperber have been outspoken in encouraging Jewish seminaries to integrate food ethics into rabbinical education.
Approximately 70 years ago, I decided to be a vegetarian. And from that time onwards, I haven't tasted either meat or fish. The conditions in which the animals are kept are quite horrendous. Tzar Baalei Chayim is forbidden.
For those who would argue that there is so much that they have to incorporate in the educational system to train rabbis, I would say you must not see this as another dimension. This is the essence of what you're trying to teach. You should not be teaching the laws of kashrut without addressing these issues. So we have a lot of work to do to be able to sensitize that religious leadership to the importance of these aspects. But there is another dimension, and that is that traditional semicha, rabbinic ordination, focuses almost exclusively on the laws that relate to kashrut, of shchita, of taravot, of admixtures, of basar v'chalav, on milk and meat, and their separation, and all the aspects that relate to traditional form of kashrut that involved animal products. Therefore, when you come along to argue that a plant-based diet is the only morally legitimate approach today, to some degree there is a perception that you are threatening the very system that is foundational to the authority of rabbinic tradition. So we have to do so in a manner that is respectful to that authority and find ways to be able to argue the case within that system. That's not simple, that takes time. We are the pioneers of this particular age, and it will take a while before there is a full awareness of all these ramifications. And of course we might add that in the meantime, the process of human society itself may render this already somewhat irrelevant, because for a variety of reasons the vegan diet is the diet of tomorrow. It's just not sustainable for humanity to be able to maintain the forms of consumption of animal products that we are conducting today.
If you ask me what God sees looking down on us, he's dissatisfied with us in general. But I don't think that he would be pleased to see the way that we're treating his creations.
Kashrut must impact upon our whole sense of our relationship to the gifts and the cosmos that God has granted us. And therefore it requires a question of greater spiritual sensitivity. Kashrut should lead us to be more noble. Compassion is such a defining quality that it must animate all aspects of Jewish behavior.
V'asita hayashar v'hatov. You should do what is right and good.
One of the ways that seminaries can practically change for sustainability relates to the food that they serve seminarians. A plant-based diet is much more ecologically sustainable than a meat-intensive diet, and the frequency with which seminaries offer meat and dairy and eggs to their students makes a difference in terms of a seminary's own ecological footprint. So the message that Rabbi Rosen and Rabbi Sperber are giving is intended to encourage seminaries to move in the direction of being more mindful of their food choices, but also to encourage the next generation of rabbis to speak and preach about these issues when they become rabbis. A third area that seminaries can embrace ecology relates to renewable energy. This area is a growth area for Jewish seminaries. Not many have done this, but I want to point it out because I believe it's one of the key areas that seminaries can do something practical. Many seminaries have land, and some of that land could be used for deploying solar energy or wind energy to generate electricity for the seminary as well as for the broader community. My organization has been involved in a faith-inspired renewable energy project, working with Anglican churches in Africa and in the Palestinian Authority to deploy commercial-scale solar fields. And this is something that seminaries could also be involved in, especially seminaries that have land. So in conclusion, I talked about three things: about integrating ecological concerns into seminary education, about doing so in particular in regards to food ethics and determining what type of food a seminary chooses to serve its students, and third, about including renewable energy as part of the physical makeup of the campus so that seminaries use renewable energy instead of using fossil fuels to power the seminary. I want to finish with a story that the Nobel laureate Toni Morrison told. A young boy comes up to an elder woman with a bird in his hands, and he says to her, "Can you tell me whether the bird in my hands is alive or dead?" And she realizes that he's playing a trick on her, and so she replies to the boy. She realizes that he's playing a trick on her. If she says that the bird is dead, then he will open his hands and the bird will fly away. And if she says that the bird is alive, he'll close his hands and he'll crush the bird, and either way she'll be wrong. So she thinks to herself for a minute and she says to the boy, "I don't know whether the bird in your hands is alive or dead. All I know is that the life of the bird, the fate of the bird, is in your hands." And that's true of us today. The ecological crisis is not about the birds and the bees or the trees and the toads. At a deeper level, what we're facing is a spiritual crisis, and in some ways a crisis of religion. This moment that we're living in requires that religious leaders and seminaries take up the mantle of ecological leadership and help the next generation inherit a livable planet. May you be blessed in your holy work toward this end.